There exists, hidden behind the veil of ink and vellum, a riddle so exquisite in its resistance to definition that it humbles the instruments of science and defies the tongue of poetry. The Voynich Manuscript, an enigma wrapped in the coiling roots of language and cloaked in the botanical dreams of another world, sits not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a mirror through which we glimpse the limits of our understanding. It is not merely a book. It is a threshold, a whispering library of unknown hands, unknown tongues, and unknown minds, lingering like a cosmic seed germinating quietly on the edge of what we call reason, discovered, or rather reawakened, in 1912 by the rare book dealer Wilfred Voynich. This strange tome has since seduced cryptographers, historians, botanists, and mystics alike. It is neither firmly fixed in the territory of science, nor safely housed in the keep of art. Rather, it occupies a liminal space, a twilight between systems, a paradox of knowing and unknowing. In that sense, the manuscript is less an artifact and more a presence, like a riddle written by the universe itself, daring us to question not just what we know, but how we presume to know it. The pages, over 200 in total, are filled with illustrations that resemble flora no one has ever catalogued, star charts that map no known heavens, women who bathe and dance through curving tubes and emerald pools, and most famously, a text written in a script seen nowhere else in recorded history. This writing flows like water, curving, looping, endlessly elegant, and yet it refuses to yield even a single verifiable word. No cipher has cracked it. No linguist has identified its root. And in its very defiance, the manuscript teaches us a strange lesson that not all mysteries exist to be solved. Some exist to awaken. It is easy in the rush of modernity to forget how often we live on the surface of things. We crave answers. We dissect, categorize, digitize. We flatten ancient symbols into data and trade myths for metadata. But the Voynich Manuscript resists that reduction. It looks back at us with the quiet eyes of the ancient world, not merely unknown, but unknowable. It invites not a conquest of information, but a surrender to wonder. And here lies the deeper significance of the manuscript, not in what it says, for we do not know, but in how it makes us feel. The sensation of turning its pages is like walking through a dream without a guide, where nothing is dangerous, yet everything is alien. It is as if we are being shown the anatomical sketches of a forgotten Eden, or the botanical codex of a lost civilization, not of this earth, but perhaps dreaming through it. Some feel the manuscript is a hoax. Others suspect it to be a mystical text encoded for the initiate, a book of green alchemy or feminine gnosis. Still others believe it to be a map of the stars, of the body, or of consciousness itself. Perhaps it is all these things. Perhaps it is none. The very ambiguity of the manuscript makes it fertile ground for reflection. It becomes a spiritual ink blot, each reader seeing what their soul is ready to confront. In the swirls of its alien script, one may see divine language. In its stars, an echo of ancient cosmology. In its women and waters, a symbolic tale of rebirth, menstruation, fertility, or psychic transformation. The book does not close meaning off, it opens it endlessly. But what if the Voynich Manuscript is more than just a curiosity? What if its silence is not a flaw but a feature, an intentional void where the reader must deposit their own consciousness? Could it be that this strange book, birthed in obscurity and passed from hand to trembling hand across centuries, is not so much about content as it is about contact? The contact between the rational and the intuitive, the visible and the veiled, the mind and the myth. If so, then its true value may lie not in decoding its script, but in decoding ourselves as we try. To approach the Voynich Manuscript is to wander into sacred space, not in the religious sense, but in the ancient sense of something set apart, something living outside the ordinary circuit of time and logic. It is a relic not just of an unknown author, but perhaps of an unknown worldview. We cannot pin it down because it was not built to be pinned. Like dreams, or love, or death, its shape changes the more we stare. It is a book, yes, but also a question mark scribed in ink and illustrated in paradox, inviting us into its labyrinth with neither Ariadne's thread nor Daedalus's wings. And so we begin, not with certainty, but with a candle lit in the dark, corridors of the unknowable. We walk forward into the manuscript's pages not to conquer them, but to listen, to feel, to reflect. The Voynich Manuscript is not a question to be answered. It is a language of silence, and in that silence, perhaps, the universe is whispering. To draw meaning from the Voynich Manuscript is like attempting to read the wind as it dances through the branches of an unknown forest. It does not give itself easily, and perhaps that is its secret power, its refusal to conform to the frameworks we impose upon meaning. And yet, when we approach it, not as a code to be broken, but as an echo to be felt, we begin to detect rhythms beneath the indecipherable, movements behind the silence. In these hidden currents lie the manuscript's core themes, not explained in language, but expressed through pattern, intuition, and the archetypal undercurrents that bind all human consciousness. At its heart, the Voynich Manuscript seems to flow in cycles. One can see this in its apparent structure: botany, astronomy, biology, cosmology, pharmaceuticals, and recipes. Yet these are not rigid categories, but rather seasons in a single turning wheel. The manuscript moves like nature itself, spiraling instead of proceeding linearly, hinting at a worldview that understands reality as layered, interwoven, and cyclical, rather than fragmented or hierarchically ordered. It is a book of spirals, not stairs. Consider the botanical section. Its plants, though alien in appearance, are drawn with reverent attention, as though the artist were capturing not merely a physical specimen, but its essence, its soul. Many believe these plants are entirely invented, or perhaps drawn from a parallel herbal tradition lost to history. But perhaps they are neither. Perhaps they are dream plants, archetypal herbs from a symbolic garden. If so, then each leaf and root may represent not a substance, but a state of being. These plants could be sigils of emotion, memory, or spiritual states, rooted not in the earth, but in consciousness. The astronomical section continues this symbolic descent into the unknown. Here we find wheels within wheels, zodiacal forms, stars and systems that gesture toward the heavens but refuse to map onto our familiar skies. But again, perhaps this is not failure, but invitation. These charts may not be charts at all. They may be mandalas, inner maps, projections of a cosmology, where stars are not distant suns but inner archetypes, pulsing symbols in the night sky of the soul. This is not astronomy for navigation, it is cosmology for initiation. Then comes the biological section, often dubbed the balneological section for its imagery of women bathing in pools connected by strange tubes or conduits, resembling alchemical vessels or even energetic meridians. These images, often dismissed as quaint or surreal, may in fact be the heart of the manuscript. Here, the manuscript turns deeply inward, suggesting a mapping of the feminine principle, perhaps not only in a literal sense, but symbolically. The baths, the flowing waters, the spirals and vessels all seem to gesture toward a sacred anatomy of the inner self, a dance of fertility, healing, and regeneration. These figures are not just women, they are metaphors in flesh. They are, perhaps, the priestesses of an invisible temple, guardians of a knowledge transmitted not through dogma, but through embodiment. From this perspective, the entire manuscript may be read as a codex of transformation. Not a medical text, nor a scientific manual, but an alchemical guide written in an undecipherable tongue, because the language it speaks is one of symbol, rhythm, and initiation. The so-called pharmaceutical pages, filled with jars and starflowers, may then be seen not as primitive medicine, but as metaphors for internal elixirs, potions of perception, rituals of awakening. Even the recipes at the manuscript's end, each line a mystery within a mystery, begin to feel more like invocations than instructions. Their unknowable script resembles prayer more than prescription, a litany of sacred words whose power lies not in their translation, but in their vibration. It calls to mind the chants of old mystics or the mantras of hidden schools, sounds that shape the soul rather than inform the intellect. Yet through all this, the unifying thread is not clarity but mystery. The core concept of the Voynich Manuscript, if one dares use such a word, may be that understanding is not always linguistic. That knowledge can be embedded in images, patterns, and resonance. That some truths are not taught, but caught, like a flame leaping from candle to candle, wordless and luminous. In this way, the manuscript becomes less a message and more a mirror. What you see within its pages reflects your own inner architecture, your questions, your archetypes, your longing for coherence in a fragmented world. It resists the mechanistic and invites the mythopoetic. Its structure is organic, recursive, like the petals of a blooming flower or the spirals of a galaxy. Its pages seem to be breathing, pulsing with a rhythm that aligns more with the heart than with the rational mind. And here we touch on its greatest paradox. It is unreadable, and yet it reads us. It cannot be understood, and yet it teaches. It presents no facts, and yet it reveals truth. Not the truth of formulas or facts, but of experience, of sacred ambiguity. This is the kind of truth that can't be stored in databases or broken into syllogisms. It's the kind that lives in dreams, in rituals, in quiet moments of communion with the unknown. The Voynich Manuscript, then, may be best understood not as a book in the modern sense, but as a ritual object, a liminal threshold through which we glimpse another way of seeing. It does not declare itself, it seduces. It does not conclude, it coils endlessly. It is a book not of knowledge, but of wisdom, and wisdom, as we have forgotten, often comes in riddles and shadows. Imagine a story not told in words, but in shapes, in patterns of ink and image that bypass language entirely and nest themselves directly in the dreamwork of the subconscious. The Voynich Manuscript is not merely a text, it is a narrative architecture, and within its winding calligraphy and surreal flora lie myths without a single spoken line. This is storytelling by geometry, by gesture, by intuited symbolism, as if the book was not meant to be read but experienced, like a silent ritual passed down through the folds of time. To step into the manuscript is to walk through a house of mirrors where each room reflects not only itself, but something long dormant in the psyche. Let us begin with the garden, the strange, otherworldly plants that dominate so many of the pages. Here is the first allegory, a tale of a lost world, perhaps a sacred forest filled with beings that were never meant to be catalogued in Linnaean fashion. They are guardians, not specimens. Each plant tells a story, not through name or use, but through form. One might imagine that this forest is the mythic garden before separation, before taxonomy, before the fall into duality. In this myth, the plants are emissaries of wholeness, beings whose roots connect to realms unseen. Their flowers whisper messages to those who know how to listen, and their stems twist like serpents through the soil of unspoken truth. In the next vision, the women appear, not merely drawn, but inscribed, woven into the manuscript's inner logic like priestesses in a forgotten mystery school. Their nakedness is not erotic but symbolic. It speaks of vulnerability, of sacred embodiment, of truths that must be lived rather than explained. They bathe in stars and waters, often connected by tubes and vessels that resemble the circuitry of both nature and body. These channels could be read as the nadis of yoga, the meridians of acupuncture, or the fluid vessels of alchemical transformation. But they may also represent mythic rivers like Lethe and Mnemosyne, the waters of forgetting and remembering. To bathe in them is to dissolve identity, to be remade. There is, in this symbolic narrative, a cyclical journey. The figures move through stages, bathing, ascending, gathering, watching. They inhabit mandalas of stars and floral fractals, performing silent rites. They echo the universal archetype of the sacred feminine. Isis searching for the pieces of Osiris, Inanna descending into the underworld, Sophia lost and rediscovered in the Gnostic eons. Yet they also embody the modern soul's dislocation, its longing for reconnection with a truth that cannot be named. The manuscript becomes a kind of pilgrimage, a symbolic path walked by the soul through transformation, dismemberment, and reintegration. And what of the stars, those looping wheels and impossible constellations? These are not maps of the physical sky. They feel closer to inner cosmologies, the constellations of the dreamer rather than the astronomer. The Voynich stars could be the fixed stars of the soul, archetypal forces that guide not ships, but destinies. They form strange patterns, often surrounding or containing the female figures, perhaps indicating that the cosmos in the manuscript is not out there, but within, folded into the womb of being. This reflects the ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. The manuscript reverses the direction, though. It suggests that what is within shapes what is without, that the universe does not merely echo the soul, it is born of it. The pharmaceutical pages add yet another layer. The jars and vessels lined in neat arrays resemble reliquaries or containers of sacred memory. Perhaps they are repositories of experience, each holding not a salve, but a story, a distilled essence of a moment, a lesson, a transformation. Their careful depiction suggests reverence, as if to say, the alchemical work is not only to transmute lead into gold, but to capture the ephemeral into form. In this light, each jar is a parable, each flower beside it a symbol of what was needed to create that specific tincture of insight. But the most profound allegory may be this. The entire manuscript is a reflection of the soul's attempt to speak to itself across time. Like a letter sent from a forgotten incarnation, it arrives in your hands with no context, no translation, only the burning sense that it means something deeply important. You feel it more than know it. In that sense, the manuscript itself is the myth, the hero's journey transcribed into an alien alphabet. It is the inner self writing to the outer self, encoded in metaphor so potent that even not understanding becomes its own kind of understanding. There is a kind of sacred cruelty to it. The manuscript invites us with open hands, only to whisper in tongues we cannot decode. But that too is part of the tale. It mirrors the human condition, the longing to understand existence, the search for coherence, the prayer sent into the void. The manuscript responds not with answers, but with imagery. It returns your question as a flower with no name. In this exchange, you begin to see that the symbolic narratives are not static. They are dynamic, interactive, and ultimately transformative. To engage with the Voynich Manuscript, then, is to participate in a kind of cosmic theater. The script is unreadable, but the performance is immersive. You are the reader, the character, the stage, and the audience all at once. In that multi-layered experience, something alchemical happens. You begin to change. your perception deepens. You start to think in symbols. You no longer ask, what does it say, but rather, what does it do to me? This is the manuscript's deepest myth, that truth need not be spoken to be known. That in the temple of the unsayable, there are stories written in light and silence, stories you already know but have forgotten. The Voynich Manuscript is one of those stories, not to be solved, but to be remembered. What use is a mystery that cannot be solved? This question echoes through modern minds like a challenge, like a protest against the seemingly impractical beauty of the Voynich Manuscript. In a world driven by utility, by the need to extract and define and make productive, a book that refuses clarity appears as an act of defiance. And yet, it is precisely this defiance, this refusal to fit into frameworks, that carries its most profound gift. For the manuscript, in all its cryptic silence, does not offer a key to knowledge. It offers a key to perception, and that perhaps is the most practical tool of all. We live surrounded by languages, not only the ones we speak, but the ones we inhabit without question. The codes of culture, the scripts of productivity, the operating systems of thought handed down generation after generation. The Voynich Manuscript arrives like a mirror with no reflection, reminding us that there are other ways of knowing, ways that bypass the literal and go straight to the symbolic, the intuitive, the embodied. It disrupts the linear pathway of comprehension and urges us toward a deeper, more liminal form of awareness. This alone is a kind of initiation. Practically speaking, engaging with the Voynich Manuscript reawakens a skill long buried beneath modern rationalism. The capacity for symbolic literacy. To sit with its pages is to exercise the muscles of ambiguity, to grow comfortable in the presence of the unknown. In a world addicted to immediate answers, this is a radical act. It teaches patience, not passivity, attunement, not analysis. It fosters the kind of perception that sees layers within layers, that hears the subtle music beneath surface noise. For artists, it is a muse, a model of how meaning can exist outside of language, how form itself can carry resonance. Each page becomes a portal, an invitation to create without the burden of explanation. For those who work in the visual, the symbolic, the imaginative realms, the Voynich Manuscript becomes a kindred spirit, a whispering well of inspiration that never runs dry. It reminds the creator that the most powerful works are not always the most understood. They are the ones that change us, even if we don't know why. For philosophers and seekers, the manuscript is a koan made flesh. Its untranslatability becomes a living metaphor for the limits of knowledge. It asks, what happens when your tools of inquiry fail? Who are you without your categories, your definitions, your certainties? In this way, the manuscript is a kind of mirror maze for the intellect, a puzzle that dismantles the very urge to solve. It points inward, suggesting that some truths are not meant to be understood but embodied. That insight is not always a product of explanation, but of presence. Even in everyday life, the manuscript offers its quiet influence. It encourages us to look again at the symbols that surround us, the signs we've stopped seeing because we've assigned them meanings too quickly. It softens the borders between reality and imagination, reminding us that the world is not made of facts alone, but of stories, rituals, and silent symmetries. A garden becomes a temple, a dream becomes a map, a silence becomes a song waiting to be heard. And what of education? In a time where knowledge is often reduced to data and metrics, the Voynich Manuscript becomes an argument for the poetic soul of learning. It suggests that curiosity is a sacred act, that wonder itself is a form of intelligence. To teach the manuscript is not to teach a solution, but to teach how to sit with mystery. It models how to question without demanding answers, how to explore without conquering, how to dwell within ambiguity without fear. It also asks us to reimagine what a book is. Is a book merely a vessel of information? Or can it be a ritual object, a living symbol, a psycho-spiritual technology? The Voynich Manuscript, in its ornate construction and careful rendering, seems designed not just to be read, but to be experienced. This offers a reminder that physical form matters, that the tactile, the aesthetic, the symbolic arrangement of things, these are not frivolous. They are gateways to perception. There is, too, a deeply personal implication. The manuscript challenges each of us to consider what untranslatable texts lie within our own lives. What dreams have we dismissed because they make no sense? What inner symbols have we neglected because they lack a dictionary? What parts of ourselves remain unopened manuscripts, shelved because we could not decode their language? The Voynich Manuscript stands as a quiet ally to these inner mysteries. It says you are not meant to make sense. You are meant to unfold. Thus, its practicality lies not in what it tells us, but in what it draws out of us. A more patient gaze, a deeper intuition, a willingness to engage with what cannot be named. It's not unlike standing before a temple, in ruins and feeling, not confusion but reverence. The structure may be broken, the language forgotten, but the atmosphere remains. Something sacred lingers, and that presence shapes us. The manuscript becomes a practice, not a thing to be decoded, but a ritual of attention. We return to its pages like monks returning to a bell. We sit before it and allow it to unmake us so that we might emerge more whole. In this way, the Voynich Manuscript fulfills a practical role more profound than instruction. It becomes a companion in the art of becoming. And so we return to the beginning, but not to the same place. The cycle turns as all sacred wheels do, and the page becomes both an ending and a threshold. The Voynich Manuscript, silent and unwavering, remains what it always was, a mirror that does not reflect but reveals, a manuscript that will never confess its origin, yet somehow awakens something dormant in those who dare to look deeper. It is not a puzzle in the ordinary sense. It is a vessel of potential, a riddle carved not into logic, but into consciousness itself. What then are we to do with it? This question echoes like the final chime of a bell fading into silence. We are not meant to solve it. We are meant to meet it as we would meet a storm over the ocean or the eyes of a wild animal in the forest, with reverence, with humility, with awe. In the act of meeting it, something shifts, not in the manuscript, but in us. This is the transformation it offers, not through information, but through encounter. The shift from seeking answers to becoming a vessel for the unspoken. The turning from external mastery to internal alchemy. The realization that mystery itself is a teacher, and that unknowing is not a void, but a space of becoming. For in every moment of stillness before its pages, we touch a deeper pattern, that some things are not broken because they are incomplete. They are whole precisely because they resist completion. The manuscript lives in this paradox and invites us to live there too. It teaches the sacred art of presence without comprehension, of listening without interpreting, of being with something without needing to own it. And how rare that is in our time. How sacred. The true manuscript, perhaps, is not even the one bound in vellum and kept in a library vault. It is the manuscript of your own life. Your dreams, your intuitions, your inner voice speaking in glyphs only you can read. The Voynich Manuscript, strange and undeciphered, becomes a metaphor for that deeper story. The one you carry, the one you often ignore, the one you've been told to silence because it doesn't speak in words that others can translate. But it is still there, waiting, like the manuscript, like the stars in a forgotten sky, like the ancient voice that speaks in symbols from the other side of reason. So here is the call, quiet yet unyielding. Live like the Voynich Manuscript. Be your own enigma. Defy simple definitions. Choose presence over proof. Value mystery as much as clarity. Speak in symbols that your soul understands even if no one else does. Let your story remain partly unsaid, for in the unsaid dwells the sacred. And most of all, remember that you, too, are a living book. Your heartbeat is a script. Your breath is a page turning. Your experiences, losses, epiphanies, long nights and silent mornings, they are written in a language the cosmos recognizes, even if you do not. Trust that. Honor that. Walk your path as if you were a sacred text being written by the universe itself. The Voynich Manuscript does not need to be solved to change you. It needs only to be encountered. As you leave its pages, do not seek to decode them. Seek to feel what has opened within you. There lies the true translation.